Hi, everybody, and welcome to this hopefully interesting conversation around one of my favorite movies of the year, which is Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always. My name is Mark Duplass. I am a filmmaker and sometimes film fan. And I have with me today some incredible filmmakers and actors. We have Eliza Hittman, who is our writer director. Say hi, Eliza. And then we have Sidney Flanigan, who is one of our lead actors of the movie. And we have Talia, Ryder. So I just want to say, you guys, first of all, congratulations on your new Critics' Choice nominations. I don't know if you saw those, but that was pretty exciting. All three of you were nominated. I mean, whatever, awards are awards, but it doesn't feel bad to be noticed and recognized. It's a good thing. I also want to say that this is my favorite movie of this year, hands down. And I think that, this movie came out in a time when we were all struggling to figure out what was happening in the world. And I feel like a lot of people missed it. And I'm really glad that people are starting to catch it and it's starting to get some attention. And Eliza, I'm curious, just starting with you, as a filmmaker, we often find movies come to us from strange places, right? Sometimes you have an ideology that you believe in strongly, that you say, I want to make a movie about this. Sometimes it's a feeling based on a song. Sometimes it's a line of dialogue or an image. And I'm curious where that first little burst was for you.
Yeah, I think for me, I'm really intrigued and motivated to make films about like kind of buried experiences that people have that they would never talk about. And I started reading about it was a long time ago, but I started reading an article about a woman in Ireland who died from being denied a life-saving abortion. And I started reading about the journey that women would take from Ireland to London when they needed an abortion. And I was like, ding, light bulb, like that's one of those omitted experiences that people wouldn't talk about, that they would suppress. And that idea of like unpacking and presenting and exploring this painful journey, that people take to access safe and legal care was just something I hadn't seen before. And it's everything that I want to do on film, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Did you at any way feel daunted by, what I think some might describe as the socio-political responsibility of telling a film like this, with this issue at its core, or was that something that emboldened you or scared you? How did you feel about that?
I was definitely intimidated. I knew that like the film would be kind of categorized in the industry as like an issue film. I was worried the whole time I was making it that Planned Parenthood would be mad at me if I did something wrong, or if I didn't, honor the work that they do in the way that they want to be seen. Um, so, I mean, I'm not very nice to myself, like in the process of making a movie in general, and all of those things, uh, you know, like I was grappling with, and I was, very afraid of disappointing, um, disappointing Planned Parenthood, and felt like there was no way that I could speak about this huge, divisive subject in the country. And I just tried to focus really on the character and the story, and not worry about what had been done, or not worry about, I don't know, just tried to hone in on this small journey instead of thinking about it in this larger context.
Yeah. Well, I definitely think that, you did an incredible job with paring down your screenplay into something that's very Spartan and very minimal. And you allowed your performers to do things, um, with their own faces and their own emotions and their own rhythms to tell the story. And I I watched it again last night, and I watched it with my 13-year-old daughter, and it was a really beautiful experience. And she was sitting next to me, and she was saying, there's just not a lot of words in this movie. I've never seen a movie like this before. They really just kind of use their faces, and it was wonderful to hear her say that. And a real testament, obviously, Sidney, to you and to Talia, to what you were doing in this movie. So, Sidney, I'm seeing all these musical instruments in your background. I know that you are primarily a musician coming into this film. You didn't have, a lot of previous acting experience. And I've been thinking about that because I was a musician in my previous life, and I sort of migrated into the film industry. And I remember when I was telling people about how I was acting in my first movie, The Puffy Chair, there was this sense of like, oh, you just kind of like fell into it. Like, oh, you're just like, are you even studied, or are you even a professional? And I remember thinking, though I didn't know how to describe it at the time, somehow all those years of making music and the artistic process and what I had gone through had kind of prepared me for my career in movies. And I still don't know how to articulate it to this day, but I wonder if you share any of those sentiments.
Oh man, I've like never heard anyone honestly say it the way that like that, and I really agree with almost like all of that. That is exactly how I feel most days, because there's a lot of times where I feel like I don't know how to talk about acting or how to talk about what the process felt like for me. And
I've never taken an acting class. I still don't know what to say.
and yeah, I mean, I always like really enjoyed performing since I was a kid. Like there was even a period of time when I was a kid where like I liked putting on magic shows, and like I had a magic kit, and I just like always liked being performative. And like, so when I found music, it was like the perfect way for me to express myself. And I was like kind of a shy kid growing up, and it was like the way for me to communicate with other people. And like when I'd walk into like a social environment, I had a ukulele for a while, and I'd bring that everywhere with me because I wouldn't know how to talk to other people, but then I would like play some music, and then people would approach me, and that made it easier.
Yeah.
And I felt like I could speak through that, and I can, plug all my emotions into this like tool that I had. And so, yeah, I think that really did help. Like when I was, like working on my first project as an actor, like being able to like embody these headspaces, like emotional places and stuff.
Mm. I that really resonates with me when you say that, because, without giving away too much in the film, there's a moment in this movie that I think is very unique, where the camera doesn't want to cut away from you, and it stays on you for a very, very long time, which is quite unique. And as I was watching that the second time, I was thinking about you as a musician, and I was thinking about when you're a musician and you're playing your part, or you're singing your verse or your chorus, you have to repeat these certain things, and you have to know on instinct when to push, when to pull back, when to give your emotion, when to hide it. And I was watching you do this masterfully, and I was thinking to myself, how does she know how to do this so masterfully as a first-time actor? And I kept thinking, well, she's probably been doing this for years as a musician, and she just moved it right over into acting. So I don't know, that's not really a question, just an observation. I think you're great.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that observation because it's nice to hear somebody else say it out loud, like what I haven't been able to say. So
Oh, yeah. Now, Talia, I know that you come from the stage and have some experience there, and coming into making a movie for the first time. I'm just curious, obviously we all have our preconceptions about the differences between stage and film, right? There's this things like, well, you got to be more subtle because, you're not talking to the back of the room. And obviously you're going to have to do more takes. So it's going to be more tiring. But I was just curious how it matched up with your expectation of what a movie would be versus theater, where you feel like you were able to either excel or where you feel like the challenges were.
Yeah, I mean, those differences that you described, I think I had like kind of mentally prepared for those things to be different. So I kind of walked into it knowing that those were going to have to be adjustments that I would have to make. But I would say like the biggest difference and the biggest challenge was kind of mentally feeling prepared walking onto set and walking into rehearsals.
Mhm.
In Matilda, it was an incredibly dance heavy show, and we spent 2 months just drilling the routines and even the scenes, just almost drilling those to the point where they felt like choreography. So with our rehearsal process, which was only 3 days long, we really just spent most of our time getting to know each other and getting just familiar with each other and physicality with each other and the script, and not necessarily drilling it like I was used to. So in those 3 days, while I felt really, really comfortable with Sidney and the script, I had like, I don't know, this nervousness walking on set. Like I wasn't ready to walk on the stage and do the entire show. That's just not how a movie works. And it was interesting. You being on set, you're figuring out all these things and doing things for the first time, where you kind of do that on stage and it's never the same every time you do it. But it was really cool, like just getting to make all these new discoveries. And I don't know, that just wasn't something I was used to.
Yeah, it's hard to articulate that to someone, that film is essentially about creating an environment where ideally surprises and lightning can strike 1 out of 7 times. And if you get it once, that's a success rate, and it's okay if those other 6 aren't as inspired as they would be. Whereas in theater, that would feel bad, because you're in front of everyone doing that. And that's a strange kind of feeling. But I don't know, for my part, I felt like there were lots of really fun, surprising sparks in your performance, and you got a lot of that. Eliza, not to keep talking about my 13-year-old, but it really was such a rewarding experience watching it with her and getting her observations through her eyes. One thing she said to me, she said, "I love the way that this is filmed." She said, "It's so modest. It feels like it's a documentary." She said, are they making up their lines? And I know you well enough, and I've seen your movies, to know that you script these things out. But it's a good thing for me to hear that, you imbue this movie from a cinema standpoint, from a writing standpoint, with such a sense of naturalism. It really does feel like things are sort of coming out of these actors' mouths for the first time. How important is that to you? Is that a byproduct of how you run your sets? How much are you engineering things so that they end up that way? And are you doing any rewrites along the way with them to keep it fresh? How do you just engineer that feeling?
Mm-hmm. No, it's pretty close to what was in the script, I would say. I think that I have a lot of self-consciousness around like writing dialogue and capturing the way people really speak. So at a certain point, I gave up. And I don't think that I'm aspiring for like a real conversational realism. Like it's really pared down. And for me, the emphasis is what's on the inside, and the subtext. So what's said is almost inconsequential because we're really paying attention to what they're feeling and thinking. And I think that is sort of how I figured out how to like redirect the attention from the dialogue to their inner worlds, I would say. I think sometimes the scene that we use in the audition has to get cut because we've heard it so many times.
Yes.
And it begins to feel less organic and less natural. I think I gravitate towards staging in a way that feels, very natural. And obviously that's a style, it's not so much like verite. Like I try and erase the presence of the camera person, but like you can but the camera feels very connected to the performances and is motivated a lot by the performances. And that's like a balance, I guess, of finding. Yeah, and I think for me, it's just important, that the audience isn't aligned with what the characters are going through more than what they're saying.
Yeah. And Sidney, as you are coming into this movie, it's a collaboration, and you're a cog in this wheel, and you need to have your own vision of what this character can be, but you also have a director who is sort of your leader. I was a singer-songwriter who was out on my own, just me doing my thing, and I never had to think about anyone else. It was always just, what can I do? And when my brother and I started collaborating together and then collaborating with others, I struggled a little bit, not in always a bad way, to try to find what is the way to hold on to what I uniquely have to offer, but also encompass everyone else's ideas, include them. I'm just curious, as much as you're willing to talk about how this collaborative process was for you of executing someone else's vision, and were there times when you felt like, I think this is right and I don't agree with you, Eliza, or what, how was all of that?
I mean, I didn't have a problem really feeling like doing something collaborative. I mean, even like as a singer-songwriter, like I've always preferred working with other musicians and having other people to bounce ideas off of. And the only reason I ever play solo is if I just don't happen to have other musicians to play with. I much prefer to have other people to like lean on and to get input from. And so like it was like, I think that's part of like what I really liked about making a movie was it sort of, like I used to play in an orchestra in high school, and it sort of reminded me of like being like this one piece of something so much larger and creating something really beautiful. And so like it felt really cool getting to like play a role, and like there's this large crew of people all working together to create this one, to make this one vision come to life. I thought that was neat. Yeah.
All right, good. So you're not selfish like me. You're able to figure that out. Good. And Talia, I thought one of the most interesting sort of dynamics in this film, the second time watching it, because the first time I was so focused on the two of you guys, was the introduction of this boy on the bus. And I was finding myself keying in on the way that you dealt with him, and trying to read how much you were genuinely interested in his attention as an interesting New York City boy, or needing his attention for certain things you needed to help with your friend. And I'm curious how much you and Eliza talked about, what your character's motivation was and how she was feeling about him. Because it seemed to be a lot of complex stuff going on in terms of, what she wanted from him.
Yeah, I mean, in the beginning, it was just one of those interactions you have. I don't know that Skylar thought too much about it. I'm sure that she's probably often approached by boys like that for a short conversation that probably could have ended a little bit sooner than it did. And I don't think it's until they're really in a crisis that she really thinks to reach back out. And I think then he becomes a tool more than a tool to help them get what they need, more than just a boy she met on the train that she really wants to hang out with, or the bus, sorry. Yeah, I think you really get to see in the karaoke scene that it's kind of elevating to a point that I'm no longer comfortable with. When he begins to whisper and touch her, I think it becomes, I think it right there, it crosses a line that she wasn't really prepared for, but a line that she's willing to have be crossed because she knows that that's really their only way to get home.
Yeah. Eliza, I heard that you had hired a consultant for this movie, to make sure that you got all the details right, and that definitely, sort of jives with everything you've been telling me about, wanting to get things right, and feeling the responsibility. But what I didn't know is that she ended up sort of becoming a larger part of the movie. So tell us a little bit about how that all happened.
Yeah, well, we did actually hire her. She was somebody, I think, I don't know if you ever feel this way when you make a fiction film, you sort of long for a documentary process, and I had such a, moving experience kind of talking to people at Planned Parenthood, being given access to tour the facilities, and in that field work, I went also to a clinic in Queens where I met Kelly Chapman, and I was just trying to hear people's stories, like more than I wanted information, because information you can find online, but people's real experiences in their work and their jobs, you have to be in the room, in their offices. And I met Kelly Chapman, who was a counselor, and I liked her as a person. And she was very open and candid with me, and her voice filtered into the script and became the counselor, on the page. And then I couldn't imagine casting anyone else. And she was an amazing friend throughout the film, and also an amazing resource. And I was able to work with her to make that scene, to workshop it, and marry it with what she does in her office every day, with the style and the feeling of the script. So we spent a lot of time kind of going back and forth, and I timed it because we shot on film. So it had to be like an exact, can of film, and have a certain, a certain precision to it.
Yeah, I had a question about, you and your cinematographer choosing to shoot this movie on film, which, for those of you who are not aware, is becoming more and more rare. It's an expense, particularly for a smaller film like this, that quite often gets weeded out early on. And I'm curious, creatively, where that really came from, and how hard you had to fight for that.
Mm-hmm. I wanted, to the film to have like an anachronistic feel, that we're starting off like on a 50s stage, and it to be, anywhere in time and place. And it's harder to do that digitally. And because I shoot close up, there's something about the way that 16mm captures and documents feelings and human beings and faces that I really love. And because we're shooting in the city where we weren't lighting, it just captures things in a way that I like. I think because I had shot beach rats also on 16mm, and that was a movie that we made for under $1 million. I was sort of like, well, why can't I do it again?
Yeah, you had some proof there, which is nice.
Yeah. So I hope that I have a precedent,
Yeah, you do now, which is good. But I
Right.
commend you because, I also work as a producer sometimes. And I know that, as sensitive as we all like to be to our filmmakers, I know that the first answer is, I know you want to shoot on film, but we'll shoot it on digital. And then in post-production, we'll make it look like film with one of those filters,
You'll
and
add grain. It'll be
we'll
like
add grain.
What is
And
yeah.
I commend you on fighting that off and pushing through. So it's an important thing, I think, and a very important part to the look of the movie. So
Thank you.
yeah. My last question for all three of you, is really, it's a simple thing. We have these discussions, and we get on here and we start talking about the movie, and we fall into a rut about the similar kinds of things we want to talk about. Where did it come from? Your performance is great. All these things, right? What are we missing? What do people not know about this movie that only you would know to tell us, that we'd never know to ask? As a side note to that, is there a walk away feeling that you want everyone to have from this movie? Is there a reason that you came to this movie that you hope people are getting from it?
I think it's, been very meaningful for all of us in a year that's been so tumultuous, that the film is resonating with people. We got to work a lot with Planned Parenthood over the last year doing outreach, and we would have done that in person, obviously, but we wanted to try and find a way to do it. So we've done a lot of regional talks with teenagers about abortion access, about sex education. And I think it's been really, for me as an artist to be able to make something that lives in the art house space and the, international space, but then also lives in the activism space, and opens up all of these dialogues and conversations and working towards normalizing abortion, has been, a help, and a given, I don't know, me purpose throughout such a long, disastrous year on the planet.
Yeah, I was thinking about both of those questions, and it kind of made me think of this one scene in the film that actually didn't end up being a part of the movie. We shot this one scene at Rockaway Beach where it was in the middle of winter, and Sidney and I went to the beach. We rode the train all the way to the end of the stop, and we took our shoes off and got in the water. And I don't know, the whole shoot we'd been doing a lot of really serious scenes, and it was really fun to just get to take our shoes off and run around in the freezing water. And that also kind of made me think about your second question, is that, I don't know, I feel like I want people to walk away from the film remembering that these two characters are still kids, and it's unfortunate that our system forces girls in those situations to grow up so quickly.
Let's see, I'd say like maybe something that, like I never really get asked about because I don't know how anyone would ask about it, but I came onto this film, like it was really important to me to like tell Autumn's story because that's something that I think, so many women experience. And around the time that I came onto this film, I was just dealing with the onset of an anxiety disorder that was very new to me and very disorienting. And it was the result of, it was kind of like something that was catching up to me from previous years of trauma related to, things that I think only women, it's like situations that are specific to lots of women. And so, I feel like the whole time I was like filming this movie, like I was on Autumn's journey, but I was also on like my own journey. And it was kind of like this beautiful like layering to me of like processing what she was going through and also what I was going through. And I think that's kind of like what was so transformative about it for me.
Well, I will just say that that's really beautiful, everything you guys are talking about. And clearly, all of these touchstones that you guys have brought from your personal lives are why this film is resonating the way it is. And we need more of you guys in cinema, and we need more movies like this. And I want to thank you for making this movie. I want to thank you for my two wonderful viewing experiences, for being able to share this with my 13-year-old daughter. And I want to thank everybody out there who is watching this. Just remember that Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always is a movie that was made with not a lot of money, and it was made with a lot of heart. And these are the kinds of movies that we need to be supporting and putting out there. So hope you guys can spread the word. Hope you enjoyed our conversation. Thank you for being with us here today. And thank you, Eliza, Sidney, and Talia, so much.
Thank you.